The evening air was getting cold, and Maya pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. She had been walking for hours, her stomach growling so loudly that she was sure people passing by could hear it. It had been 2 days since her last proper meal, and the hunger was no longer just uncomfortable. It was painful. She was 17 years old, but life on the streets had made her look both older and younger at the same time. Older because of the tiredness in her eyes, younger because she was so thin now. Her sneakers had holes in them, and she could feel the cold pavement through the worn-out soles with every step she took. Maya found herself in a part of the city she usually avoided. This was where rich people came to eat and shop. The buildings here were clean and beautiful, with fancy lights and big glass windows. She didn't belong here, and she knew it. People who walked past her would look away quickly, as if being homeless was something they might catch if they looked too long. But tonight, Maya wasn't thinking about how she didn't belong. She was thinking about food. Real food, hot food, the kind of food that would stop her stomach from hurting and give her enough energy to find a safe place to sleep for the night. That's when she saw it. A restaurant called Giovanni's. It wasn't the biggest or the fanciest place on the street, but something about it drew her attention. Maybe it was the warm yellow light that spilled out onto the sidewalk. Maybe it was the smell of fresh bread that made her feel dizzy with hunger. Or maybe it was what she saw through the large front window. There, in the corner of the dining room, sat a beautiful grand piano. It was black and shiny, catching the light from the chandeliers above. Maya stopped walking and just stared at it. She hadn't seen a piano like that in 3 years. 3 long years since everything in her life had fallen apart. She stood there on the sidewalk, people walking around her, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not quite hope, but something close to it. An idea was forming in her mind. A crazy idea. The kind of idea that homeless kids don't usually have because they've learned that taking risks usually makes things worse, not better. But Maya was so hungry. And that piano was just sitting there, probably not being used at all. She could play. She used to be really good, actually. Before the accident, before everything changed, before she ended up on the streets with nothing but the clothes on her back and memories she tried hard not to think about. She took a deep breath and looked down at herself. Her jeans were dirty and had a rip in one knee. Her jacket was stained and too thin for the weather. Her hair was tangled because she hadn't had access to a proper shower in weeks. She probably smelled bad too, though she had stopped noticing her own smell after the first month on the streets. What was she thinking? They would never let someone like her into a place like this. The hostess would probably call security before Maya even finished asking her question. But what if they did let her in? What if she could convince them somehow? The worst they could do was say no, or maybe throw her out. She was used to that. Maya watched through the window for a few more minutes. The restaurant was busy but not packed. Well-dressed people sat at white-clothed tables eating pasta and drinking wine. They looked so comfortable, so safe. They had probably never wondered where their next meal would come from. They had probably never slept in a doorway or been chased away from a park bench by police. A waiter walked past the piano carrying a tray of food. He didn't even glance at it. Nobody was playing it. It was just sitting there silent and unused. What a waste, Maya thought. That beautiful instrument just sitting there like a piece of furniture when it could be making music. Her mother had always said that music was meant to be shared, that keeping an instrument silent was like keeping a bird in a cage. Her mother had taught her to play when she was just 5 years old. By the time Maya was 14, teachers at her music academy were saying she had a real gift. They said she could go professional if she kept working hard. They said she had a future, but that was before. Before the drunk driver, before the funeral, before the foster homes, before aging out of the system with nowhere to go and no one who cared. Before all of this. Maya shook her head, trying to clear away the memories. Thinking about before only made things harder. She needed to focus on now, on tonight, on the fact that she needed food and there was a piano in that restaurant. She looked at her reflection in the window. She looked awful, but she couldn't do anything about that now. She either walked through that door and tried, or she walked away and spent another hungry night, looking for a safe place to sleep. For a moment, she almost walked away. It was easier to not try than to try and fail. At least if she didn't try, she could avoid the shame of being rejected again. She had been rejected so many times in the past 3 years. By social workers who said the system was full. By shelters that had no beds. By people who looked right through her as if she didn't exist. But that piano kept calling to her. She could almost feel the keys under her fingers. She could almost hear the music. And she was so hungry. Maya straightened her shoulders and walked toward the door. Her hand shook as she reached for the handle. It was heavy, probably brass or something expensive like that. For a second, she thought it might be locked, that the universe was giving her a sign to turn around. But the door opened smoothly, and a wave of warm air washed over her. The warmth felt so good after hours in the cold that Maya almost cried. Inside, the restaurant smelled like heaven. Garlic and tomatoes and fresh bread and herbs she couldn't name. Her stomach growled even louder, and she pressed her hand against it, embarrassed. A young woman in a black dress stood behind a hostess stand. She had perfect makeup and shiny hair pulled back in a neat bun. When she looked up and saw Maya, her professional smile faltered for just a second. Maya saw the surprise in her eyes, the quick assessment, the moment of decision about how to handle this situation. Maya knew she needed to speak before the woman could, before she could call someone to escort her out, before this chance disappeared. "I know I don't look like I belong here," Maya said quickly, her voice coming out softer than she intended. She cleared her throat and tried again. "But I saw your piano, the one in the corner. I can play. I'm actually pretty good. I was wondering if maybe I could play something for you. Just one song. And in exchange, maybe I could have something to eat. Anything, even just bread. I'm not picky." The words tumbled out fast, and Maya could hear the desperation in her own voice. She hated how she sounded. Weak. Begging. But she was begging. She was asking strangers for food in exchange for performing like some kind of street musician, which she supposed was exactly what she was now. The hostess stared at her, mouth slightly open. She clearly had never dealt with this kind of situation before. Behind her, Maya could see diners at their tables. Some had noticed her now. She saw a woman whisper something to her husband. A teenager at another table pulled out his phone, probably to film this weird moment. Maya's face burned with shame. This was a mistake. She should leave. But before she could turn around, the hostess held up one finger. "Wait here," she said, not unkindly. "I need to get the manager." And so Maya waited, standing in the entrance of Giovanni's restaurant while well-dressed people stared at her and whispered. She focused on the piano in the corner and tried not to run away. The hostess disappeared through a doorway near the back of the restaurant, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Maya stood there, feeling every eye in the room on her. She kept her gaze down, studying the pattern of the expensive tiles beneath her worn-out sneakers. Each second felt like an hour. A middle-aged couple at a nearby table was whispering. Maya couldn't hear the words, but she could guess. They were probably wondering why someone like her was allowed inside. Or maybe they felt sorry for her. Maya wasn't sure which was worse. She didn't want pity. She just wanted food. After what felt like forever, but was probably only 2 minutes, the hostess returned. Behind her walked a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a black apron around his waist. This had to be the manager. He looked at Maya for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his eyes. She had learned on the streets that looking down made people think you were up to something, but looking directly at people sometimes made them uncomfortable too. It was hard to know the right thing to do. "I'm Antonio," the man said finally. His voice had a slight accent that Maya couldn't quite place. "Italian, maybe," which would make sense given the restaurant's name. "Lisa here tells me you want to play my piano for a meal." "Yes, sir," Maya said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I can really play. I'm not trying to scam you or anything. I'm really hungry, and I saw the piano and I thought maybe—" Her voice trailed off. She sounded pathetic even to herself. Antonio crossed his arms, but not in an angry way. More like he was thinking. He glanced over at the piano in the corner, and something changed in his expression. It was quick, a flash of sadness that came and went, but Maya saw it. "That piano belonged to my mother," he said quietly. "She passed away 2 years ago. We put it here in the restaurant because she always loved this place. She used to play for the dinner crowd sometimes. The customers loved it." "I'm sorry," Maya said, meaning it. She knew what it was like to lose people you loved. Antonio nodded. "No one has played it since she died. I couldn't bring myself to let anyone touch it. It felt wrong somehow." He paused, studying her face. "You really know how to play?" I do, Maya said. I trained at the Riverside Music Academy for 5 years. I was going to audition for Juilliard before she stopped. She didn't need to tell him her whole sad story. Before things changed, Antonio's eyebrows went up. Riverside? That's a serious school. It was, Maya said simply. The manager was quiet for another moment, clearly wrestling with a decision. Maya could see other staff members watching now. A waiter had stopped mid-pour of wine. 2 women in the kitchen doorway were peeking out. The whole restaurant seemed to be holding its breath. Here's what we'll do, Antonio said finally. You play one song, just one. If you can really play, if you're not wasting my time, I'll feed you. If you can't, he paused. Well, I'll still give you something to eat. But just this once. I'm not in the business of running a charity. Do we have a deal? Relief flooded through Maya so intensely that her knees felt weak. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Antonio gestured toward the piano. Go ahead then. Everyone's watching now anyway. Might as well give them a show. Maya walked across the restaurant, very aware of every person tracking her movement. Her sneakers squeaked slightly on the clean floor. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. The sound seemed loud in the unusual quiet. The piano was even more beautiful up close. It was a Steinway, she realized. A really good one. The kind of piano she used to dream about owning someday. The black surface was so polished that she could see her reflection in it, and she quickly looked away. She didn't want to see how she looked right now. She pulled out the bench and sat down. The cushion was soft, much softer than any place she had slept in months. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing down. They were perfectly maintained, not a speck of dust anywhere. Antonio clearly took good care of his mother's piano even if no one played it. Maya's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She hadn't played in 3 years. What if she had forgotten how? What if her fingers didn't work the way they used to? What if she embarrassed herself in front of all these people? But she was here now. There was no backing out. And besides, she had been playing piano since she was 5 years old. Surely it was like riding a bike. You don't forget, right? She took a deep breath and thought about what to play. She needed something that would prove she could really play. Not just pick out a simple melody, but she also needed something she could remember without sheet music. Something her fingers knew by heart, and then it came to her. The piece her mother used to play every single evening before dinner. The piece Maya had heard thousands of times growing up. The piece she had learned when she was 12 and had played at her mother's funeral. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was beautiful and sad and complicated enough to prove she had real training. It was also the most meaningful piece of music Maya knew. If she was going to play piano for the first time in 3 years, this was the right choice. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering her mother's hands moving over their old upright piano at home. Remembering the smell of dinner cooking in the kitchen. Remembering her father reading the newspaper in his armchair. Listening. Remembering when life was normal and safe and full of music. Maya opened her eyes and placed her hands on the keys. This was it. This was the moment that would determine whether she ate tonight or went to bed hungry again. She pressed down on the first note, and the sound that came out was perfect. Clear and rich and exactly right. The piano was beautifully tuned. Her finger moved to the next note and the next, and suddenly the muscle memory was taking over. Her hands knew what to do, even if her brain was scared. The restaurant around her seemed to fade away. The watching people, the pressure, the hunger in her stomach, all of it disappeared. There was only the music now. Only the keys under her fingers and the sound filling the air, and Maya began to play. The opening of the nocturne was gentle, almost like a whisper. Her left hand created a steady rhythm, while her right hand floated over the melody. It was harder than she remembered. Her fingers were stiffer from lack of practice and from the cold nights on the streets, but they were working. They were doing what they needed to do. As she played, something strange happened. All the emotions she had been pushing down for 3 years started rising up. The grief over losing her parents, the fear of being alone, the shame of being homeless, the anger at how unfair life was, the loneliness that never went away no matter how many people surrounded her on the city streets. All of it poured into the music. Every note carried feeling. Every phrase told a story. This wasn't just playing anymore. This was survival. This was proof that she was still human, still worth something, still still here despite everything that had tried to break her. Maya's eyes were closed now. She didn't want to see if people were watching or if they had gone back to eating. She just played. The nocturne moved into its more complex middle section and her fingers danced over the keys, hitting each note exactly where it needed to be. This was who she really was. Not the dirty homeless girl begging for food. Not the invisible person that people stepped around on the sidewalk. She was Maya. She was a pianist. She was someone who could create beauty even when her own life felt ugly and broken. The music swelled and fell, moved and paused, spoke without words, and in that moment, playing her mother's favorite piece on a dead woman's piano in a restaurant full of strangers, Maya felt more like herself than she had in 3 long years. The first thing Maya noticed when she started playing was the silence. Not the silence of an empty room, but the heavy, expectant silence of people holding their breath. She could feel it even with her eyes closed, the way the whole restaurant seemed to lean in and listen. Her fingers moved across the keys with a confidence that surprised her. 3 years without practice should have made her rusty, should have made her stumble and forget. But the music was still there, locked somewhere deep in her memory, in her muscles, in her bones. It was like her hands remembered even when her mind wasn't sure. The nocturne started soft and gentle, almost like a lullaby. Her mother used to say this piece sounded like moonlight on water. Maya had never really understood what that meant until now, when she was playing it in this moment of desperation and hope. Now she could hear it. The shimmer, the quiet beauty, the sadness underneath something peaceful. As she played, memories came flooding back. Not just of her mother playing this piece, but of everything. Of Saturday morning lessons with Mrs. Chen, her piano teacher who always smelled like lavender. Of recitals where she wore fancy dresses and felt nervous and proud at the same time. Of her father filming her performances on his phone, always saying, "That's my girl," afterward. Of the academy, where she had been one of the youngest students. Where older kids had been jealous of her talent. Where teachers had pulled her aside to tell her she was special, that she had something rare. Where she had dreamed of stages and concert halls and a life filled with music. All of that was gone now. The academy, the dreams, the future she had imagined. The drunk driver who hit her parents' car had killed more than just 2 people that night. He had killed everything Maya was supposed to become, but not this. He hadn't killed this. Her ability to play, to make music, to create something beautiful out of nothing but her hands and a piano. That was still hers. Nobody could take that away, no matter how much they took everything else. The music grew more complex as it moved into the second part. Her right hand danced over the higher keys while her left kept the steady rolling rhythm underneath. There was a part here that had always been tricky, a run of notes that required her fingers to move fast and precise. She had practiced it hundreds of times as a kid. Please let me remember this, she thought. Please don't let me mess up now. But her fingers knew. They hit every note exactly right, flowing over the keys like water, just like her mother always said. The difficult part passed, and Maya felt a small victory bloom in her chest. She opened her eyes for just a moment, glancing at the room. What she saw made her hands almost stop moving. Everyone was watching her. Not just glancing over while they ate. Really watching. A woman in a red dress at a table near the window had tears running down her face. A young waiter stood frozen by the kitchen door, a tray of food balanced in his hands, completely still. An older man in an expensive suit sat with his fork halfway to his mouth, forgotten, his eyes fixed on her. And Antonio, the manager who had given her this chance, stood behind the bar with his hand over his mouth. Even from across the room, Maya could see the shine of tears in his eyes. She closed her eyes again quickly. She couldn't think about them watching, couldn't think about what they were feeling or why. If she started thinking about the audience, she would get nervous. She would make mistakes. She needed to stay in the music. Stay in that place where nothing existed except the piano and the notes and the story she was telling with her hands. The nocturne moved through its middle section, building to a kind of emotional peak before falling back again. This was the part her mother had loved most. She used to say it sounded like someone remembering something beautiful but sad, something that was gone but not forgotten. Maya understood that now in a way she never had as a child. She was living it. Playing this piece was remembering. Remembering who she used to be, who her parents were, what her life looked like before it all fell apart. Beautiful but sad, gone but not forgotten. Her fingers pressed the keys with more force now, not quite loud but stronger, more insistent. The music demanded it. This wasn't background noise. This was emotion made into sound. This was pain and beauty twisted together until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Somewhere behind her she heard a small sound. Someone sniffling, trying not to cry too loudly. Then another person. And another. The restaurant was filling with the sound of people trying to hold back tears while she played. Maya's own vision blurred. She was crying too, she realized. Tears were running down her face and dripping onto her dirty jacket. But her hands kept moving. The music didn't stop. It couldn't stop, not now. Not when she was so close to the end. Every mistake she had made in the past 3 years seemed to press down on her shoulders. Every night she had slept in a doorway. Every time someone had looked through her like she didn't exist. Every meal she had skipped. Every moment she had felt completely and utterly alone in the world. But also every sunrise she had survived to see. Every small kindness from strangers who didn't have to care. Every time she had found the strength to keep going, when it would have been easier to give up. Every moment that proved she was still here, still fighting, still Maya underneath all the dirt and hunger and fear. All of it went into the music. The piano was absorbing her pain and transforming it into something people could hear and understand. She wasn't just playing notes anymore. She was telling her story without words. She was saying everything she had never been able to say to anyone. I'm still here. I'm still human. I still matter even though I have nothing. The nocturne began its descent toward the ending. The music got softer again, gentler, like it was tucking itself into sleep. The notes came slower. The urgency faded into something peaceful and accepting. This was the part that always made her mother smile. That little half-smile she got when something touched her heart. Maya played these final phrases with a tenderness that surprised even her. Her hands were tired now. Her arms ached. Her fingers were starting to cramp from lack of food and months without playing. But she was so close. Just a little more. Just a few more measures. The last section was the hardest to play because it was the simplest. Just a few soft notes, repeated with small variations, getting quieter and quieter until they faded away completely. It required control, delicacy, the ability to touch the keys so lightly that they barely made sound. Maya's mother used to say the ending of this piece was like watching someone you love walk away. You can still see them, but they're getting farther and farther, and soon they'll be gone. But there's a kind of peace in it too. A acceptance. A goodbye that isn't angry, just sad. Her fingers felt the keys one last time. The final note hung in the air, sweet and lonely and perfect. Then silence. Real silence this time. Not the waiting kind. The kind that comes after something important has happened and no one knows quite what to say. Maya sat with her hands still on the keys, eyes closed, tears still wet on her face. She had done it. She had actually done it. She had played the whole piece without stopping, without making any major mistakes. She had proven she could really play. But more than that, she had remembered. For the first time in 3 years, she had felt like herself. Not the version of herself that was homeless and hungry and scared. The real version. The Maya who was talented and passionate and full of music. Slowly, she opened her eyes and lifted her hands from the piano. They were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She didn't want to turn around. Didn't want to see if people were staring at her or judging her or feeling sorry for her. But she had to face them eventually. This wasn't her piano. This wasn't her restaurant. She was just a homeless girl who had asked to play for food. Maya took a deep breath, wiped her face with her dirty sleeve, and turned around to see what would happen next. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, nobody moved. The restaurant was completely still. Maya sat on the piano bench, her heart pounding, looking at a room full of frozen faces. She wiped at her wet cheeks again and waited for someone to do something. Say something. Anything. Then Antonio started clapping. It wasn't polite applause. It wasn't the kind of clapping you do at the end of a school play, because you're supposed to. It was real. His hands came together hard and loud, echoing through the silent restaurant. His face was still wet with tears, and he didn't bother wiping them away. Within seconds, other people joined in. The woman in the red dress stood up, still crying, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. The businessman in the expensive suit got to his feet, applauding with a look on his face like he had just witnessed something impossible. The young couple near the window, the elderly woman dining alone, The group of friends celebrating a birthday, all of them rising, all of them clapping. Soon, every single person in the restaurant was standing. The sound was overwhelming like thunder, filling the room and bouncing off the walls. The kitchen staff came rushing out, the chef still in his white hat, all of them applauding. Even the hostess, who had first looked at Maya with such uncertainty, was clapping with tears in her eyes. Maya didn't know what to do. She had never experienced anything like this. At her recitals as a kid, people clapped politely and said nice things, but this was different. This felt like more than appreciation. It felt like recognition. Like these strangers were seeing her. Really seeing her, maybe for the first time in 3 years. She stood up shakily, her legs weak from sitting and from the emotion of it all. She didn't know if she should bow or wave or just run out the door because this was all too much. She wasn't used to being the center of attention anymore. She was used to being invisible. Antonio was crossing the restaurant now, moving quickly past tables, his face transformed with emotion. Before Maya could say anything or prepare herself, he pulled her into a tight hug. He smelled like garlic and wine and something else, maybe cologne or aftershave. It was overwhelming in a different way. She couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged her. "Brava," he said into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "Brava, brava. My mother would have loved that. She would have loved you." Maya felt something crack open inside her chest. She started crying again. Really crying this time, sobbing into this stranger's shoulder while the whole restaurant watched and applauded. She couldn't help it. The kindness was too much. The relief was too much. Everything was too much. Antonio held her until she got control of herself. Then he pulled back and looked at her with such warmth that it almost started her crying all over again. "You are not eating by the door," he said firmly. "You are not eating in the kitchen. You are sitting at the best table in this restaurant and you are ordering whatever you want. Anything, everything, do you understand?" Maya could only nod. She didn't trust her voice. The applause was finally dying down as people returned to their seats, though many were still wiping their eyes and talking in excited voices. Antonio led Maya to a table by the window, the kind of table that probably required a reservation weeks in advance. The hostess rushed over with a clean white napkin and placed it in Maya's lap with a gentle smile. A waiter appeared with a glass of water, then another one with bread. Warm bread, fresh from the oven, with butter. Maya's hands shook as she reached for it. She wanted to eat slowly, to have dignity. But the moment that bread touched her lips, she couldn't help herself. She ate like she hadn't eaten in days because she hadn't. Antonio sat down across from her, not seeming to notice or care how desperately she was eating. He pushed the bread basket closer to her. "More," he said simply. "Eat, then we'll talk about real food. Real food." The words made Maya want to cry again. When was the last time she had eaten real food? Not scraps from dumpsters or day-old donuts from the shelter. Real, proper food made by a chef in a kitchen. She finished 3 pieces of bread before she could slow down enough to sip the water. It was cold and clean and perfect. She couldn't remember water ever tasting this good. "What's your name?" Antonio asked gently. "Maya," she managed to say around a mouthful of bread. "Maya," he repeated like he was testing how it sounded. "That's a beautiful name." "I'm Antonio, but I suppose you already know that." She nodded, swallowing. "Thank you for letting me play, for this." She gestured at the bread, the water, the chair she was sitting in. "No," Antonio said, shaking his head. "Thank you. You just gave everyone in this restaurant something they didn't know they needed. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. That piano has been silent for 2 years. I couldn't bear to let anyone touch it, but hearing you play," his voice got rough. "It was like my mother was here again. Like she was saying it's okay to let go a little. To let the music live again." A waiter approached the table with a menu, but Antonio waved it away. "She doesn't need a menu," he said. "Maya, do you like pasta?" "I like everything," Maya said honestly. Antonio laughed, really laughed, and it was a warm sound. "Then we start with the soup. The minestrone, then the fettuccine alfredo, the lasagna, the chicken marsala. We'll bring you a little of everything until you say stop." "That's too much," Maya protested weakly, even though her stomach was screaming, "Yes, yes, all of it. It's not too much. Nothing is too much after what you just did. You made grown men cry, child. You made my chef cry, and he's from Sicily. He doesn't cry at anything." The food started arriving. First, a bowl of soup that steamed and smelled like heaven. Maya had to force herself to eat it slowly, to taste it properly. It had vegetables and beans and pasta, and it was the most delicious thing she had ever put in her mouth. As she ate, something strange started happening. People kept coming over to the table. Not all at once, but one at a time, approaching carefully like they didn't want to disturb her but couldn't help themselves. The first was the woman in the red dress. She was older, maybe 60, with kind eyes that were still a little red from crying. "I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner," she said softly. "I just wanted to tell you something. My daughter used to play piano. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. She was only 28. And tonight, listening to you play, it was like I could hear her again. It was like she was here with me. So thank you. Thank you for that gift." Maya didn't know what to say. "I'm so sorry about your daughter," she managed. The woman smiled sadly. "She would have loved your playing. She would have wanted to be your friend, I think. You have something special?" She reached into her purse and pulled out some folded bills. "Please take this. I know you need it." "I can't," Maya said automatically. "You can," the woman insisted, pressing the money into Maya's hand. "Buy yourself a warm coat. It's getting cold out there." Before Maya could argue, the woman was walking away back to her table where an older man waited, probably her husband. Maya looked down at the bills. $200. She had never held that much money in her life. Then the young couple approached. They were probably in their 20s, dressed up like they were celebrating something special. "That was incredible," the young man said. He had an earnest face and excited eyes. "We're actually musicians too." "Well, trying to be. I play guitar in a band. We've been talking about giving up lately. It's hard, you know? Trying to make it. But watching you play," he shook his head. "It reminded us why we started. Why music matters. So thank you for that." His girlfriend nodded. "You were so brave to walk in here and ask to play. That took courage." They left a business card with their band's name and social media information. "If you ever want to jam or need anything, reach out," the guy said. More people came. A teenager who said she was thinking about quitting piano lessons but wouldn't now. A businessman who confessed he used to play as a kid and had forgotten how much he missed it. An elderly man who said his late wife had loved Chopin and that Maya's playing had brought back memories he thought he had lost. Each person left something. Money, business cards, a scarf because Maya looked cold, a gift card to a clothing store. It kept piling up on the table next to her food, and Maya didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Antonio sat through all of it with a knowing smile, like he had expected this to happen. When the flow of people finally stopped, he leaned forward. "You see," he said, "art does that. Real art, it breaks people open, makes them feel things they forgot they could feel. You didn't just play piano tonight, Maya. You reminded all of us what it means to be human." Maya sat at that table for over 2 hours, eating slowly because Antonio kept bringing more food even when she said she was full. Between courses, he would sit down and they would talk. Or rather, he would talk and she would listen while she ate. Too hungry and too overwhelmed to say much. He told her about his mother, about how she had immigrated from Italy when she was young, barely speaking English but knowing how to cook and play piano, about how she had worked 3 jobs to send Antonio to college, about how she had always insisted that every restaurant should have music because food and music went together like love and laughter. She would sit at that piano, Antonio said, pointing to the corner, and she would play for hours. Old Italian songs, classical pieces, whatever came to her. Customers would come back week after week just to hear her play. Some people said they came for the pasta, but I think they really came for her music. "She sounds amazing," Maya said. "She was," Antonio agreed. His eyes were sad but also warm with memory. "When she died, I thought about selling the piano. It hurt too much to see it just sitting there silent, but I couldn't do it. It felt like selling a piece of her. So it stayed, and nobody has touched it until tonight." He looked at Maya with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I think maybe she sent you here. My mother, I mean. I think maybe she knew it was time for that piano to sing again." Maya didn't know what to say to that. She didn't believe in signs or fate or any of that stuff. Life had taught her that bad things happen randomly and nobody was watching out for you from above. But sitting here in this warm restaurant with a full stomach and people who had treated her like she mattered, it was nice to imagine that maybe someone somewhere had guided her to this moment. The restaurant was starting to empty out. It was getting late, past 10 o'clock. The few remaining customers were finishing their desserts and coffee. Maya had eaten so much she felt almost sick, but it was a good sick. A safe sick. The kind that came from actually having enough instead of never having anything. She looked down at the pile of money and gifts on the table. She counted the cash when Antonio went to check on something in the kitchen. $460. She had never had that much money at once in her entire life, not even before she was homeless. What am I supposed to do with all this? She asked when Antonio came back. He smiled. Whatever you need. That's the point. Those people gave it to you because they wanted to help, because you touched them. Don't feel bad about accepting it. I feel bad, Maya admitted. Like I'm taking charity. It's not charity, Antonio said firmly. You earned it. You gave them something beautiful. They gave you something in return. That's how the world is supposed to work. Maya folded the money carefully and put it in her jacket pocket. $460 wouldn't last long. She would need to find a shelter, buy some food, maybe get some clean clothes. But it was more than she'd had this morning. It was something. The last customers were leaving now, calling out goodnight to Antonio and waving at Maya. The kitchen staff was cleaning up, the sound of dishes and running water coming from the back. The hostess was counting the cash register, the normal end-of-night routine. Maya knew she should go. She had gotten what she came for and so much more. She had no reason to stay, but she didn't want to leave. Leaving meant going back outside to the cold, back to finding a doorway or an alley, back to being invisible and alone. Here she was warm. She was safe. She was Maya the pianist, not Maya the homeless girl. I should probably go, she said, even though everything in her wanted to stay. Antonio looked at her for a long moment. Where will you go? Maya shrugged, trying to act like it didn't matter. There's a shelter a few blocks from here. Sometimes they have beds, and if they don't, she shrugged again. I'll figure something out. I always do. Antonio was quiet, his face serious. Then he said, Can I ask you something? How old are you? 17. I'll be 18 in 3 months. And how long have you been on the streets? A while, Maya said, not wanting to get into it. Maya. His voice was gentle but firm.
How long?
She sighed. 1.5 years, since I aged out of foster care. Antonio closed his eyes briefly, like the answer pained him. When he opened them, there was determination there. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to wait here while I finish closing up the restaurant. Then you're coming home with me. What? Maya's eyes went wide. No, I can't do that. Why not? Because I don't know you. Because that's weird. Because I'm not a charity case, so you're right, you don't know me. But you know I fed you when you were hungry. You know I let you play my mother's piano. You know I cried listening to you play. That counts for something, doesn't it? Still, Maya said. Antonio held up his hand. Before you say no, let me explain. I live above the restaurant. There's a small apartment, 2 bedrooms. One is mine, one is my office, but it has a couch that pulls out into a bed. You can stay there tonight, just tonight. Get a good sleep, take a hot shower, eat breakfast. Then tomorrow you can decide what you want to do. But tonight you don't sleep on the street. Agreed? Maya wanted to say no. Taking help from strangers was dangerous. She had learned that the hard way. But something about Antonio felt safe. Maybe it was the way he talked about his mother. Maybe it was the tears she had seen in his eyes. Maybe it was just that she was so tired of being scared all the time. Just tonight, she said finally. Just tonight. Antonio agreed. But the way he smiled made her think he had other plans. Antonio finished closing the restaurant, counting money with the hostess, checking that everything in the kitchen was clean and turned off, setting the alarm. Maya waited by the door, holding her jacket with the money in the pocket close to her body. Part of her still thought about running. It would be easier. Safer, maybe. But another part of her, the part that was tired and hungry for more than just food, wanted to trust this kind stranger. Finally, Antonio grabbed his own jacket and led her through a door she hadn't noticed before. It led to a staircase, narrow and steep, that went up to the 2nd floor. At the top was another door, and beyond that a small apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and warm. There was a living room with a couch and a TV, a tiny kitchen, a hallway that probably led to bedrooms. Normal things. Things Maya used to have and take for granted. The bathroom is down the hall, first door on the left, Antonio said. There are clean towels in the cabinet. Take as long as you want in the shower. I'll put some clean clothes outside the door. They'll be too big, but they'll be warm. Maya just nodded, overwhelmed again. The couch pulls out, he continued, showing her how the mechanism worked. I'll get you sheets and a blanket. Are you still hungry? I can make you something. No, Maya said. I'm so full I might explode, Antonio laughed. Good, that's good. Okay then, make yourself at home. I mean it. Whatever you need, just ask. He left her alone in the living room and went to get bedding. Maya stood very still, afraid to touch anything. This didn't feel real. Any minute now she would wake up in some alley and realize this had all been a dream. People didn't just help like this. Not without wanting something. But Antonio came back with sheets and a thick comforter and 2 pillows, and he made up the couch bed while chatting about nothing important. He didn't ask her any more questions about her past. He didn't lecture her or look at her with pity. He just treated her like a normal person staying at his place. I'm usually up early, he said when he finished. The restaurant opens at 11, but I like to get downstairs by 8 to prep. But you sleep as long as you want. No rush, okay? Okay, Maya said. Good night then. He paused at the hallway. I'm really glad you came to my restaurant tonight. Maya, I mean that. Then he was gone, disappearing into what must be his bedroom, leaving her alone in the living room with a made bed and the promise of safety, for at least one night. Maya stood there for a while, not sure what to do. Finally, she went to the bathroom. It was small but clean, with a shower curtain that had fish on it and a medicine cabinet that was probably as old as she was. She looked at herself in the mirror for the first time in weeks. She looked awful. Her hair was a tangled mess. Her face was dirty, with smudges on her cheeks and dark circles under her eyes. Her lips were chapped. She looked tired and thin and older than 17. But she also looked like someone who had just played piano in a restaurant full of people. Someone who had made strangers cry. Someone who still had music inside her despite everything. Maya turned on the shower and waited for it to get hot. Then she took off her dirty clothes and stepped under the water. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she let herself cry without trying to hide it. Maya woke up confused. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft. The room was too warm. There were no sounds of traffic or people yelling or police sirens. Just quiet, peaceful quiet. Then she remembered. The restaurant. The piano. Antonio. She was in his apartment above the restaurant, safe and warm under a thick comforter that smelled like laundry detergent. She sat up slowly, her body aching in a weird way. Not the bad ache of sleeping on concrete. This was different. Like her muscles were finally relaxing after being tense for months and didn't quite know how to feel about it. Sunlight was coming through the window. Real sunlight. Not the gray early morning light she usually woke up to. She had slept late. Really late. She grabbed her phone from her pocket, the cheap one she had managed to keep charged at the library sometimes. It was almost 9:30 in the morning. Maya couldn't remember the last time she had slept past sunrise. On the streets, you learned to wake up early. Sleeping late meant getting bothered by cops or business owners who wanted you gone. It meant missing the breakfast service at the shelter. It meant being vulnerable. But here, she had slept for almost 10 hours straight. She got up and folded the blanket carefully, then pushed the bed back into a couch like Antonio had shown her. She didn't want to leave a mess. She found her clothes from last night in a neat pile on the floor. Antonio had left fresh clothes outside the bathroom like he promised, and they were clean now, sitting folded on a chair. He had washed her clothes. Sometime last night or early this morning, Antonio had taken her dirty, probably smelly clothes and washed them. Maya felt something hot and uncomfortable in her chest. It was too much kindness. She didn't know how to accept this much kindness. She could hear sounds coming from below. The restaurant opening, probably. Voices and the clatter of dishes and someone laughing. Normal morning sounds of people starting their workday. Maya went to the bathroom and splashed water on her face. She looked better than last night. The shower had helped. The sleep had helped. But she still looked like what she was. A homeless kid wearing borrowed clothes that were too big. She should leave. That was the smart thing to do. Antonio had said one night, and he had given her that. She had money in her pocket now. She could find a shelter, maybe even a cheap motel for a few nights. She could figure out her next move, but part of her wanted to stay. Wanted to see what would happen if she didn't run away from kindness for once. She heard footsteps on the stairs, then a knock on the door. "Maya, you awake?" Antonio's voice. Yeah, she called out. Can I come in? It's your apartment. The door opened and Antonio came in carrying a tray. On it was a plate with eggs and toast and bacon, a glass of orange juice and a small vase with a single flower. He was already dressed for work in his white shirt and black pants, but he was smiling like he was genuinely happy to see her. I didn't know if you were a breakfast person, he said, setting the tray on the coffee table. But you need to eat. You're too thin. You don't have to keep feeding me, Maya said, but she was already moving toward the food. It smelled incredible. I'm Italian. Feeding people is what we do. Sit. Eat. Maya sat and ate while Antonio settled into a chair across from her. He didn't talk, just let her eat in peace. The eggs were perfect, scrambled with cheese. The bacon was crispy. The toast had real butter. Even the orange juice tasted better than any juice she'd ever had. When she was halfway through, Antonio finally spoke. So I have a proposition for you. Maya stopped chewing. Here it was. The catch. The thing he wanted in return for all this kindness. She should have known. Antonio must have seen something change in her face because he held up his hands. It's not what you're thinking. Just hear me out, okay? She nodded slowly, her guard up now. Last night after you played, something interesting happened. My phone started ringing. Then it didn't stop. People who were at the restaurant were telling their friends. Someone posted a video online. By this morning I had 37 reservation requests for this weekend. 37. For Saturday night alone. Maya wasn't sure what this had to do with her. The thing is, Antonio continued, they're not calling about the food. I mean, they are, but that's not the main reason. They're calling because they heard there's a girl who plays piano. They want to hear you play. Oh, Maya said. She didn't know what else to say. So here's my proposition. Every Friday and Saturday night you play piano at the restaurant. 2 sets, maybe an hour each. I pay you $50 a night, plus you can eat whatever you want. And the apartment upstairs, the one you slept in last night? There's actually a second bedroom I use as an office. It's small, but it has a bed. You can stay there. Rent-free. Maya stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I need a piano player. Because my restaurant could use the business. Because... He paused. Because my mother would have wanted me to help you. And because I think you deserve a chance. You don't even know me. I know you're talented. I know you're brave enough to walk into a strange restaurant and ask for a chance. I know you played Chopin like someone who studied for years. That's enough for me. Maya's mind was racing. A job, a place to live. It sounded too good to be true. Which meant it probably was. What's the catch? She asked. No catch. Well, one condition. You have to go back to school. Or get your GED. You're 17. You should be finishing high school, not living on the streets. I don't have time for school if I'm working. You're working 2 nights a week. That's 10 hours total. You have plenty of time for school. Maya looked down at her plate. School. She hadn't thought about school in so long. She had dropped out when she ended up in foster care when everything fell apart. Going back felt impossible. She was too far behind. Too old. Too different from the other kids. I don't know, she said. Think about it, Antonio said. You don't have to decide right now. Stay a few more days. Try playing this weekend. See how it feels. Then decide. Why are you being so nice to me? Antonio was quiet for a moment. Then he said, when my mother first came to this country, she had nothing. No money, no family, no English. She worked in restaurants washing dishes. She slept in a room with 6 other people. It was hard, but people helped her. A woman who owned a bakery let her sleep in the back room sometimes. A man who ran a diner taught her English. Little kindnesses that added up to a life. He looked at Maya with those kind eyes. She used to say that we have to pass kindness along. That when someone helps you, you don't pay them back. You pay it forward. You help the next person who needs it. So that's what I'm doing, paying forward all the kindness that was shown to my mother. Maya felt tears starting again. She seemed to cry a lot now. Maybe because she had held it in for so long that now it just kept coming out. I don't know how to accept help, she admitted. That's okay, Antonio said. You'll learn. Start by saying yes. Maya took a deep breath. Every instinct told her to run. To not trust this. To protect herself by staying alone. But she was so tired of running. So tired of being alone. So tired of protecting herself from kindness because she was afraid of what it might cost. Okay, she said quietly. I'll try. Just for a little while. Antonio's face broke into a huge smile. Yeah, you mean it? Yeah, but if it doesn't work out, I can leave, right? No hard feelings? No hard feelings, he agreed, though I think it's going to work out just fine. He stood up and offered his hand. Maya shook it, feeling like she was signing a contract that might change her life, hoping she wasn't making a huge mistake, hoping that maybe, just maybe this time things might actually turn out okay. Welcome to Giovanni's, Antonio said. Let me show you your room. The first week was the hardest. Maya kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Antonio to change his mind or reveal what he really wanted, but it never happened. He just treated her like a normal person, like someone who deserved to be there. The room he gave her was small but perfect. It had a twin bed with a real mattress, a small desk, a lamp, and a window that looked out over the alley behind the restaurant. It wasn't much, but to Maya it felt like a palace. She had her own space, her own door that locked, her own bed that nobody could kick her out of. The first night alone in that room, she just sat on the bed and cried. Good tears this time. Relief tears. Tears that came from finally feeling safe. Antonio kept his word about everything. He paid her $50 for each night she played, always in cash, always with a smile. He fed her constantly, not just on the nights she worked, but every day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. He would bring food upstairs or call her down to eat with the staff. She was gaining weight, filling out, starting to look healthy again, and the playing. The playing was the best part. That first Friday night, Maya was so nervous she almost threw up. Antonio had put up a small sign by the hostess stand. Live piano music, Friday and Saturday evenings. The restaurant was fully booked. People actually coming just to hear her play. She wore a simple black dress that Antonio had bought for her. Nothing fancy but clean and new and hers. Her hair was washed and brushed. She almost didn't recognize herself in the mirror. When she sat down at the piano that first Friday, her hands were shaking. The restaurant was packed. Every table was full. People were watching her, waiting. What if she messed up? What if she wasn't as good as they remembered? What if that first night had been a fluke? But then her fingers touched the keys and everything else faded away. She played Chopin again, because that felt right for a first performance. Then she played some Mozart, some Debussy, a piece by a modern composer whose name she couldn't quite remember, but whose music she loved. The restaurant was silent except for her playing. People ate slowly, savoring their food and the music at the same time. And when she finished her first set, the applause was just as strong as that first night. She played a second set an hour later. Different pieces this time, lighter and more playful. By the end of the night, she was exhausted, but also more alive than she had felt in years. This was what she was meant to do. This was who she really was. The tips started that night. People would come up after she played and press money into her hand. $5, $10, sometimes $20. By the end of the weekend, she had made her $100 from Antonio plus another $140 in tips. More money than she had ever earned in her life. She didn't know what to do with it at first. She was used to spending money as soon as she got it because holding on to it on the streets was dangerous. But now she had a safe place. She could save it. Plan for the future. The idea was so foreign it made her head spin. The second week, Antonio brought up school again. He had researched options and found an adult education center that offered GED classes. They met in the evenings a few times a week, which meant Maya could go without interfering with her weekend performances. Just try it, he said. One class. If you hate it, you don't have to go back. Maya went to one class, then another, then another. The teacher was patient and didn't ask questions about where she had been or why she had dropped out. The other students were all ages, all backgrounds, all there for their own reasons. Nobody judged. Nobody cared that she was behind or that she had been homeless. They just helped each other learn. Within a month, Maya had fallen into a routine. She studied during the day, sometimes in the apartment, sometimes at the library. She ate lunch with the restaurant staff, who had adopted her as one of their own. The chef taught her how to make pasta from scratch. The hostess showed her how to do makeup. The waiters told terrible jokes that made her laugh despite herself, and she played piano twice a week, building a following. People started requesting songs. Antonio bought a tip jar that filled up every night. Someone posted another video online that got thousands of views. A local newspaper called asking to do a story. Maya said no to the newspaper. She wasn't ready for that kind of attention. Wasn't ready to tell her whole story to strangers. But the fact that they asked meant something. It meant people cared about her music, about her. The third month, Antonio's cousin came to visit. Her name was Linda, and she was a piano teacher at a community college across town. Antonio had told her about Maya, and she wanted to hear her play. Maya was nervous playing for a real teacher. What if she wasn't actually that good? What if she had bad habits from not having lessons for 3 years? What if Linda told Antonio he was wasting his time? But Linda sat through an entire performance with a thoughtful expression, and afterward she asked Maya to play some scales and technical exercises. Maya did, feeling like she was back in an audition. When she finished, Linda was smiling. "You're very talented," she said simply, "and you've had excellent training. But you've also got some gaps from not playing for a few years. If you're interested, I'd like to give you lessons. Free of charge. I teach at the college on weekdays, but I could meet you here once a week. Sunday afternoons, maybe?" Maya looked at Antonio, who was grinning like he had planned this all along. Which he probably had. "I can't afford lessons," Maya said. "I said free of charge," Linda repeated. "Consider it an investment in a talented young musician." "What do you say?" Maya said yes. Of course she said yes. How could she say no to more music, to getting better, to having a real teacher again? The lessons started the next Sunday. Linda was tough but fair, pushing Maya to work on her weak spots while praising her strengths. She brought sheet music for pieces Maya had never tried. She explained theory in ways that finally made sense. She treated Maya like a serious student, not like a charity case. For the first time in 3 years, Maya started thinking about the future. Not just tomorrow or next week, but months ahead, years ahead. She started imagining herself finishing her GED, maybe going to community college, maybe studying music for real, maybe someday playing in bigger venues than a restaurant. It felt dangerous to hope like that. Hope had hurt her before. But it also felt necessary, like she couldn't keep living without it. One Saturday night in her 4th month at the restaurant, something happened that changed everything again. Maya was playing her second set, a challenging piece by Rachmaninoff that Linda had been helping her with. She was focused on the music, barely aware of the audience. When she finished, the applause was normal, good but not unusual. She stood up to take a break before her final few songs. That's when she noticed a man at a table near the piano. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and an expensive suit. He was watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. As she walked past his table toward the kitchen, he stood up. "Excuse me," he said. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Maya hesitated. People sometimes wanted to talk after she played, to compliment her or ask about song requests. But something about this man felt different. "More serious, I suppose," she said. "My name is Robert Chen," he said, handing her a business card. "I'm a talent scout and manager for performing artists. I work with musicians mostly, helping them book venues and build careers." Maya's heart started beating faster. She looked at the card. It seemed real, professional, with an address and phone number and everything. "I've been hearing about you," he continued. "The pianist at Giovanni's who made people cry. I thought it was probably exaggerated. The internet stories usually are. But then I heard you play tonight, and I have to say the stories don't do you justice." "Thank you," Maya said, not sure where this was going. "I'd like to talk with you about representation, about helping you play bigger venues, real concert halls, maybe even recording some music. You're too talented to just play in restaurants. No offense to this establishment," he added quickly, glancing at Antonio, who was watching from the bar. Maya didn't know what to say. This was the kind of thing she used to dream about as a kid. A real manager, real performances. But it also felt too fast, too much. She had only been stable for 4 months. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," Robert said smoothly. "Take my card. Think it over. Call me when you're ready to talk." After he left, Maya showed the card to Antonio. She expected him to be upset, to think she was abandoning the restaurant. But he just smiled and pulled her into a hug. "This is good," he said. "This is what should happen. You're too good to stay here forever. I always knew that." "I'm not leaving," Maya said quickly. "Not yet," Antonio agreed. "But someday you will. And that's okay. That's what's supposed to happen. Birds aren't meant to stay in nests forever." That night, lying in her small room, Maya looked at Robert Chen's business card for a long time. She thought about everything that had happened in the past 4 months. How she had gone from sleeping in alleys to having her own room, From starving to having too much food, from being invisible to being sought after by a talent scout. It felt like a dream, the kind of dream she was afraid to believe in because believing meant it could be taken away. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she had to believe anyway. Maybe she had to take the risk of hoping, of planning. 6 months after that first desperate night when Maya walked into Giovanni's asking to play for food, she sat in a small concert hall preparing for her first real performance outside the restaurant. Her hands were sweating and her stomach was doing flips, but this was a different kind of nervous than she used to feel. This was excited nervous, the good kind. The past 2 months had been a whirlwind. After thinking about it for 2 weeks, Maya had called Robert Chen. They met for coffee, with Antonio insisting on coming along to make sure everything was legitimate. Robert had been patient with their questions and had showed them contracts with other musicians he represented. Everything checked out. He was the real deal. The plan was simple but ambitious. Maya would continue playing at Giovanni's on weekends because that was her home base, her foundation. But during the week, Robert would book her for small concerts and events. They would start small, build her reputation, eventually work up to bigger venues, maybe even make a recording someday. It all sounded impossible. But then again, 6 months ago, having her own room and 3 meals a day had sounded impossible too. She had finished her GED 2 months ago, passing with high scores in every subject. Antonio had thrown her a little party at the restaurant, complete with a cake that said, "Congratulations, graduate," in fancy icing. The kitchen staff had cheered. Linda had cried. Maya had felt proud in a way she hadn't felt since before her parents died. Now she was enrolled part-time at the community college, taking general education classes and music theory. She was 18 years old, legally an adult, but she still felt like a kid sometimes, a kid who was learning how to be a person again. Tonight's concert was at a small performing arts center on the other side of town. It only seated about 200 people, but Robert had said it was sold out. 200 people coming just to hear her play. The thought was terrifying and thrilling at the same time. She was wearing a new dress, deep blue this time, that Antonio had insisted on buying even though she had her own money now from tips and her weekend performances. "You need to look like the professional you are," he had said. He and Linda were both in the audience tonight, along with several regulars from the restaurant who had become like family. Maya peeked out from backstage and saw the seats filling up. Young couples, older people, families with teenagers, all different kinds of people united by one thing. They wanted to hear music. Her music. Robert appeared beside her. "You ready?" "No," Maya admitted. "But I'll do it anyway," he smiled. "That's the right attitude. Just do what you do at the restaurant. Play from your heart. They'll love it." The lights dimmed. Someone came on stage to introduce her. Maya listened to them describe her as a rising talent and a remarkable young pianist, and it felt surreal. Were they really talking about her? The same girl who had been digging through dumpsters for food less than a year ago? Then it was time. Maya walked onto the stage and the audience applauded. The spotlight was bright, making it hard to see individual faces. Maybe that was better. She could just focus on the piano, a beautiful grand that had been tuned specifically for tonight. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. For just a moment she let herself remember that first night at Giovanni's. How scared she had been, how hungry, how desperate. How she had played Chopin with tears running down her face, thinking it might be the last time she ever touched a piano. But it hadn't been the last time. It had been the first time of a new beginning. Maya took a deep breath and began to play. She started with the same piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The one that had changed everything. It felt right to honor that moment, to acknowledge where she had come from. As she played, the nervousness faded away. This was what she was meant to do. Whether she was playing for 50 people in a restaurant or 200 in a concert hall, the music was the same. The feeling was the same. The way it connected her to something bigger than herself, something that transcended her circumstances and her past and her pain. She moved through her program. Pieces she had been practicing for weeks with Linda. Chopin, Mozart, Debussy, some contemporary composers. Each piece told a story, expressed an emotion, created a world. And the audience was with her every step of the way. She could feel their attention, their appreciation, their connection to the music. When she played the final notes of her last piece, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the applause erupted, and people were standing, clapping and cheering. Maya stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. She spotted Antonio in the third row, tears streaming down his face like that first night. Linda was next to him, beaming with pride. There were 3 encores. The audience wouldn't let her leave. Finally, for the last one, she played something she had never performed before, a piece she had written herself over the past few months. It didn't have a name yet. It was just her story translated into music. The loneliness and fear and pain, yes, but also the hope, the kindness of strangers, the second chances, the way music had saved her life in more ways than one. When she finished her own composition, the applause was different. Louder somehow, more personal. People weren't just appreciating technical skill now. They were responding to something real, something true, something that came from the deepest part of who she was. After the concert, there was a small reception in the lobby. People lined up to talk to Maya, to shake her hand, to tell her how the music had moved them. An elderly woman said Maya's playing reminded her why she loved being alive. A teenage girl asked if Maya gave lessons because she wanted to play like that someday. A man in a wheelchair said the music had made him forget about his pain for an hour. Each person carried their own story, their own reasons for being there. And somehow Maya's music had touched all of them. It was overwhelming and beautiful and exactly what her mother had always said music was supposed to do. Connect people, remind them of their shared humanity, make the world feel a little less lonely. Robert was networking, talking to venue owners and other managers, already planning the next steps, but Maya was focused on the people in front of her, the ones who had come to listen. Each conversation felt important, meaningful. Antonio finally made his way through the crowd and pulled her into a huge hug. "I'm so proud of you," he said into her hair. So proud. "My mother would have loved this. She would have loved you." "I wouldn't be here without you," Maya said, and she meant it. Without Antonio's kindness that first night, without him giving her a chance when he had no reason to, none of this would have happened. She would still be on the street, still hungry, still invisible. "You would have found your way," Antonio said. "Talent like yours doesn't stay hidden forever. I just helped it along a little." Linda joined them, her eyes wet with tears. "That original piece at the end," she said. "Maya, that was extraordinary. You're not just a performer, you're a composer too. Do you realize how special that is?" Maya hadn't thought about it like that. She had just been trying to express what was inside her, what she couldn't say with words. But maybe Linda was right. Maybe she could create music, not just play what others had written. The reception lasted another hour. By the time it wound down, Maya was exhausted but also energized in a way she had never felt before. This was her future. This was what she wanted to do with her life. Not just survive, but create. Not just exist, but truly live. In the car ride home, Antonio drove while Maya sat in the passenger seat, watching the city lights blur past the window. The same streets she had walked as a homeless kid looked different now. Less threatening, more full of possibility. "Robert wants to book another concert in 6 weeks," Maya said. "A bigger venue this time, and he's talking to some people about maybe recording a few tracks. Nothing guaranteed, but he thinks there's interest." "That's wonderful," Antonio said. "And you'll still play at Giovanni's?" "Of course," Maya said quickly. "That's home. That's where this all started." "I'm not giving that up," Antonio smiled. "Good, because the customers would riot if you left. You're the main attraction now. The food is secondary." They both laughed. It wasn't really true, but it was nice to hear anyway. When they got back to the apartment above the restaurant, Maya went to her room and sat on her bed. Her own bed in her own room, in a place where she was safe and wanted and valued. She thought about the girl who had walked into Giovanni's 6 months ago, desperate and terrified and convinced that the world had nothing good left to offer. That girl was still part of her. The memories of sleeping in alleys and going hungry and being scared didn't just disappear because life got better. But they didn't define her anymore either. She was more than her worst moments. She was more than what had been done to her or what she had lost. She was Maya. She was a pianist, a student, a person with a future. She was someone who had survived and was now learning to thrive. She was someone who made strangers cry with her music, who could take pain and transform it into beauty, who had been given a second chance and was determined not to waste it. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. She opened it. "Hi Maya, this is Jennifer from tonight's concert. I'm a social worker at the youth center downtown. We have a lot of kids from tough situations,